Hey everyone, welcome back. So in this lecture, we're going to be talking about how to get the Firebase SDK initialized, and I think I'll probably save the code initialization and demo for the next lecture, but that should be the end of this section on how to get Firebase started in your project. So with this, we're going to need a few things, and one thing that you might not have installed is Cocoa Pods. Now, we'll be talking about this topic over the course of this entire class, but for now, just understand that Cocoa Pods are going to allow us to use certain features of Firebase in our application. So to get this to work, we're going to need to download Cocoa Pods before we get into this step. It doesn't really specify it here, so I will show you the command that you're going to have to run. So let's go ahead and get started with the terminal, and I will show you guys what you're going to have to type in to get everything working. So let's first let me show you, if you don't already have a terminal open, best way to get it is just type it, click on the Finder here and type in terminal and double click. That should bring up this console here. If I just clear this really quick. And a few commands, just in case that you guys aren't familiar with the console. PWD is print working directory. That's going to show you where you are in your directory structure on your computer. To change the directory, you want to type in CD for change directory. And to go up a directory or back, you just type in ... If I hit enter there, that's going to bring me up a directory. So if I do PWD again, it's going to bring me back to users. So I want to actually access, my desktop, because that is where my Firebase root project directory is. If you go to exercises, you'll have to navigate there as well. ls is just going to dump the directory contents, so you can see what is contained within the directory. And Firebase setup. Okay, so for this next command, you don't have to be in your root project directory. I just navigated here because there is going to be a command that is going to be necessary that we execute it in this directory. So the first command that I want to show you, if I just type in history, I typed in history because I've already done this, but if I look here, I'll find a command that I've typed in called sudo gem install cocoa pods. Now, this is the command that I was referring to that you're going to need to run if you don't have Cocoa Pods installed on your computer already. This is what you're going to have to do before we even get into going through these steps. These instructions are assuming that you already have Cocoa Pods installed. In case you don't, you're going to want to run this command. So what does it mean, just quickly? Sudo is short for super user do. It's basically saying I need to be an admin of this computer to run this installer. Gem would be the installer, and then the command of gem would be install, and then what I want it to install is Cocoa Pods. And when you hit enter, it's going to ask for your password to your computer. Just type that in and hit enter. Now, it may take 10 minutes, 15 minutes to install, so just get that running, and then come back to this video and you can continue. So if you haven't yet installed it, pause this video, install it, and then come back. But if you already have Cocoa Pods, we can move on. So as you can see that I've already navigated through using the cd command to my root project directory. And that's where you're going to want to be when you run these commands. So what I'm going to want to type in is, if I refer back to my instructions here, is first pod init, and then I'm going to want to add the Firebase core pod. Now the Firebase core pod is just going to include some core Firebase functionality. Nothing specific yet in terms of what features we're using, except that it includes the analytics by default. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to say pod init over in the terminal. And remember, you have to execute this in the root project directory that we had created for this section of the class. So I'm going to say pod init, and I'll ls. And you'll see that I have a pod file. So I'm going to use vi, which is basically the editor in the console, to open up this pod file. And you can see that the file contents are there, and we can actually go in and edit those contents. So here we have, under this pound pods for Firebase setup, that's where you're going to add your the pods that you want for your project. We could add them all, but we're only going to add the ones that we need. We don't want to add every single pod to our project, because then it just becomes, first of all, it's just unnecessary, and second of all, it could just bloat your project, and you don't want that. So we're just going to add what we need. So what do we need? It's suggesting to us that we add the Firebase /core pod. So let's add that. And to add that, you have to toggle the editor into editing mode. And to do that, you press I. Okay, so now we're in editing mode. So now I can actually type things into this file through the VI console editor. So I will type in Firebase core, and I just want to make sure that I spelled that right. Let's see. I think the C needs to be capitalized. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to hit enter here, and I'm going to hit escape. And when you hit escape, you'll see down below here these this semicolon, or this colon here. And basically what that is saying to you, okay, well, now you've entered in the command line of this console. So there's two things that I type in. So you hit escape, and then you hit W. W means write to disk. It's going to take your changes right here, this Firebase/core, and it's going to write it to that file. And there you go. And then I want to quit out this. So I'm going to hit escape again. And I'm going to hit the colon and Q. And that brings me back to the console. So we made the edits to our pod file. Now we have to actually run the script. So what's the last thing that we got to do here? We actually have to execute pod install. And pod install is going to look at this pod file, and since we had added Firebase/core, it's going to actually grab that and install it so our project can actually go ahead and use it. So pod install. Okay, so I get an error here. Invalid pod file, uninitialized constant pod file Firebase. So let me open up the pod file. I'm sure I've just made a few errors. Okay, yeah. So I forgot to, if I type in I again, I can go back into the edit mode. Pod is what I needed. It's what I was missing. And these single quotes around the string Firebase /core. So, okay, let me do escape and colon W. That'll write it to the disk, and quit out of this. And let me just run pod install again, and it should work. Okay, so now it's kicked off, and it is going to go ahead and install the core functionality of Firebase to my app, and also grab the analytics component to Firebase and include that in the project as well. Okay, so it looks like it has wrapped up. It says, please close any current Xcode sessions and use Firebase setup.xc workspace for this current project from now on. Now this is important. So if I go ahead here and go back to my Xcode, apparently it has, okay, here we go. So let me actually close this out just for good measure because I'm not sure if it had reopened on its own. And let me navigate to the actual project here and right here. So from now on, every time you want to edit your project, you're going to have to use this instead of your standard Firebase setup Xcode project. You're going to want to use this. So let me launch the project through that. And we should be okay now. Okay, so I'm going to stop it here. I hope everything wasn't too confusing. Just to reiterate really quick, what I wanted you to do is you want to run the gems sudo gems install cocoa pods, just to make sure that I spell that right. Okay, yeah, you want to run this to install the cocoa pods. If you already have cocoa pods installed, you don't have to worry about that. And then you want to run and go to your, make sure that you're in your root project directory, and you want to init pod. That's going to create the pod file. If I hit ls, that'll show us the pod file. Then you want to open up that pod file. And you're going to want to add all necessary pods underneath this pods for Firebase setup. And you want to type in pod and then Firebase/core. That's the only one that we wanted to include on this project, so that should be it. And really, this is just another script for our pod install to run and go ahead and grab everything that it's going to need for the project. And the only other caveat is that now, whenever you want to work in your project, make sure you launch the project via this file. Okay, so in the next lecture, we're going to talk about how to add the initialization section of the code to get Firebase wrapped up and working in our project. And then we'll demo it, and then we'll move on to the next section. So until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye.